Hi, everybody. I'm Roy Firestone. The 1972 Miami Dolphins are the only NFL team to have completed a perfect season with an undefeated record, winning both the regular season and the Super Bowl. They finished the 1972 season with a 17-0 record, including their playoff and Super Bowl victories. 6 players from that team are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Perhaps as many as 4 are worthy of consideration, too. One thing all of those players have in common is that they were drafted by or acquired by the architect of that team, Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas built the Dolphin dynasty and also built the Minnesota Vikings from the bottom up. He was later an executive who built the Colts and the 49ers before returning to the Dolphins as vice president. I believe that Joe Thomas deserves a place in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and today 3 Dolphin Hall of Famers will tell you why they agree with me. Larry Csonka, class of 1987, Larry Little, class of 1993, and Bob Griese, class of 1990, offer their thoughts as to why Joe Thomas deserves to be a Hall of Famer. This is footage of you being met at the airport, coming out of college, drafted by the Dolphins by Joe Thomas. There was the plane, Eastern Airlines, Joe Thomas waiting for you at the airport to greet you. Look, you're probably 22 years old here. What was it like to have this guy meet you at the airport?
It's exciting to be drafted high in the NFL. It's also quite a compliment when you think about it, particularly from someone that's been around and been a personnel director for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Thomas was no stranger at that point to the personnel office. You know, he had proved he had what it took. So to meet him and having meet a man that feels that highly and that intensely about your ability to contribute to a winning team, it's pretty satisfying.
We got a quote from Bob Griese, your old pal, and he said this of Joe Thomas. He said, "There's no doubt that Joe was one of the best talent evaluators in the history of the NFL. The Dolphins were the beneficiaries of that, and he built one of the great dynasties in league history. And he used every tool available. He used the draft to bring me aboard, along with Larry Csonka, Bill Stanfield, Dick Anderson, Jake Scott, traded for 3 Hall of Famers, Larry Little, Paul Warfield, Nick Buoniconti. And he signed also as free agents Jim Langer, another Hall of Famer, possibly Bob Kuchenberg in the Hall of Fame down the road, but there's another great player. The point is that he really had an eye for talent.
He had a feel, not just for talent, he had a feel for heart. What mattered was what was the score at the end of the game. And if you had that kind of heart, that Joe Thomas had the ability to recognize that. If that isn't qualities that should be in the Hall of Fame, what are?
Larry, if you could put it together, what you think, why you think Joe Thomas belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Joe's the one that really put that team together. And then when you look at it again too, Roy, look at the Minnesota Vikings. He was Minnesota before he came to the Dolphins. Right. And those guys that he drafted at Minnesota, like the Carl Ellers, the Alan Pages, and those people. So, he definitely belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Joe Thomas built the Minnesota Vikings as an expansion team, drafting eventual Hall of Famers, Carl Eller, Fran Tarkenton, and Bobby Bell. But Thomas also built the Colts into a contender. The late Jim Irsay, owner and CEO, said this just before his death. He said, "Joe worked for my father in Baltimore in the 70s and helped turn the Colts from a doormat to contender overnight in 1975. He authored drafts in the early 70s that helped the Colts become division champs in 75, 76, and 77. Those were 3 of the most exciting years in my career. Joe was an outstanding general manager, one of the best talent evaluators I've ever known." If I said Joe Thomas, if I just say his name, what does that name mean to you in terms of the Hall of Fame?
He deserves to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. No doubt.
The Pro Football Hall of Fame already has one Joe Thomas enshrined. Well, now it's time for another one. Joe Thomas belongs in Canton. I'm Roy Firestone, and thanks for your consideration.